The next clip we're going to show you is Dr. Jordan Peterson, and it's actually my favorite clip of his. It's not necessarily the most profound one that he's released, but in it he is so perfectly describing energy law as a process. He just doesn't have the formula yet. And we're hoping that some of his students or anyone that sees this who can get in contact with him, who knows him personally, can show this to him, because he is so close to having the final piece of the puzzle that he needs to be able to take his work to the next level, where he can actually really start helping people through the proper formula.
There's a sacrificial element in maturation, right? You have to sacrifice the pluripotentiality of childhood for the actuality of a frame. And the question is, well, why would you do that? Well, one reason is it happens to you whether you do it or not. You can either choose your damn limitation, or you can let it take you unaware when you're 30, or even worse when you're 40. And then that is not a happy day. And I see people like this, and I think it's more and more common in our culture, because people can put off maturity without suffering an immediate penalty. But all that happens is the penalty accrues, and then when it finally hits, it just wallops you. Because when you're 25, you can be an idiot. It's no problem. Even when you're out in a job search, it's like, well, you don't have any experience and you're kind of clueless. It's yeah, you're young, you know, it's no problem. That's what young people are like, but they're full of potential. Okay, well, now you're the same person at 30. It's like people aren't so thrilled about you at that point. It's like, what the hell have you been doing for the last 10 years? Well, I'm just as clueless as I was when I was 22. It's yeah, but you're not 22. You're an old infant, right? And that's an ugly thing, an old infant. You choose your damn sacrifice, because the sacrifice is inevitable, but at least you get to choose it. And then there's something that's even more complex than that in some sense, is that the problem with being a child is that all you are is potential, and it's really low resolution. You could be anything, but you're not anything. So then you go and you adopt an apprenticeship, roughly speaking, and then at least you become something. And when you're something, that makes the world open up to you again. You know, if you're a really good plumber, well, then you have some employees, you run a business, you train some other people, you enlarge their lives, you're kind of a pillar of the community, you have your family. Once you pass through that narrow training period, which narrows you and constricts you and develops you at the same time, then you can come out the other end with a bunch of new possibility at hand. And Jung talked about that. He thought that part of the proper path of development in the last half of life was to rediscover the child that you left behind as you were apprenticing. And so then you get to be something and regain that potential at the same time. Very, very smart. Well, he was very, very smart, so that's very wise thing to know. You get to pick your damn sacrifice. That's all. You don't get to not make one. You're sacrificial whether you want to be or not. That's a good thing to know as well.
Fascinating clip. Absolutely mind-blowing. Right now in our society, we have an epidemic of prolonged adolescence. And as he's saying, children are all potential, but they're low resolution potential because they haven't actually achieved any goals yet. So part of the maturing process, like he says, is going through this funneling into becoming something greater. What he's describing there is 100% phase 2 again of energy law. If current is constant and resistance increases, potential increases. If you are in constant action, the more resistance you put on something, the more potential will come out of them. This is what everyone is trying to put off right now, and unfortunately the entire system is enabling it, because we have an education system where everyone passes regardless of whether you do the work, and you have parents that are basically allowing their children to stay in the nest far longer than is necessary, because no parent wants to be the one that kicks the little bird out of the nest. Everything he is describing about this clip was me. It was absolutely me. I was floundering 20-something with big dreams and little action and lots of talk and almost no follow through, to the point where one day my father came into the basement, because I was that kid playing video games too, and he said, you know how you're always talking about going to British Columbia? I go, yeah, I'm just trying to save up some money. I'm going to probably try and go in 6 months. He said, pack up your shit and get it in the car. We're going Friday. And he drove me from rural Ontario all the way to Victoria, BC. And he sat me down. We found a 2-bedroom apartment, and he sat me down. He paid first and last month's rent. And he said, you cannot afford this. Down the road, you're going to find a university. You're going to make a little notice. You're going to put it up there because you need a roommate. You need to find a job immediately. Your mother and I love you, but don't come home for at least a year. And he drove away. And the truth is, it was the greatest thing he ever did. And the situation now, that was 30 years ago, the situation now is very different economically, but that fundamental need to force action is upon us. We cannot have a whole generation of young people that are avoiding the inevitable sacrifice, like he says, the pluripotentiality of childhood. You can be anything, but we're allowing young people to dwell on the anything that they could be far too long. At some point, you just need to start life, because the penalty does accrue. And what he means by that is the longer you put off the journey down the path, which is all resistance all the time, the further behind you fall. That's the penalty. The penalty is that if you are starting to establish your life at 35 instead of 25, you're 10 years behind the people that are the same age as you that started at 25. And that is an ugly thing, trust me, because I'm living it. You do not want to be the person that's thrust into all the responsibilities of life at 40, where you are at the first time at 40, you have rent, you have bills, you have all of these things that you're responsible for. If current is constant and resistance increases, potential difference increases. But potential difference is also called pressure. So this is that whole funneling process that he's describing. You must sacrifice yourself to all of the obstacles that you are obligated to overcome, so that the new higher version of you, which is pressurized to all of the overcoming of all of those resistances, gets established. And you cannot avoid this. You can sit in your parents' basement until the day your parents die, but the day your parents die, you end up on the street because you don't know how to pay the taxes, pay the furnace repairman, fix a roof. Until you start establishing the skills you need to navigate basic life, you are basically an infant. And unfortunately, this is now epidemic in our society. And as he says, you cannot avoid this. You can put it off as long as you want, but it will only be harder on you when the inevitable need to start taking on life kicks you in the nuts. And it's going to do it. So you better start figuring out how to do anything. Any action that you take is better than no action or the current action that you're taking. If current is constant and resistance decreases, potential decreases. Well, the constant action that the average floundering 20-year-old is doing, which was the same one I was doing 30 years ago, is playing video games. Video games is a low resistance activity. You can play them all day. You can be in constant action playing them all day. But because the challenge of them, other than to your mind, to your physical body, is so low, your potential is decreasing every hour of every day after a certain age beyond sheer entertainment value. And it's okay to play video games. You cannot play them 8 hours a day. If you are playing them 8 hours a day, you are putting off the inevitable resistance overcoming that is required to reach full maturity. And with that full maturity comes your identity, a true identity, not a persona that you have created based on all of the media you've been influenced by. Sooner or later, you will find yourself in a circumstance where life will obligate you to rise to a challenge. And if you haven't overcome a whole bunch of little challenges before the big challenge comes, you will be crushed under the weight of it. If the entire universe is energy and matter is simply concentrated energy, then the law of energy must be influencing everything. We've taken Ohm's law of resistance and expanded it into what we call Ohm's wheels of life. It works kind of like a compass, so you can see where you're at based on the type of actions you're taking. Because there is no activity that you will ever do in your entire life that does not fall into one of the 6 phases of Ohm's law. You just haven't been shown it yet, because quite frankly, no one's figured it out yet. And we've spent 20 years working on this. So now we're starting to present this information to the general public. If you'd like to learn more about energy law, be sure to visit Seniorthinktank.ca. There's some free books that you can download there and lots of other videos. And we look forward to seeing you next week.